This was a movie suggested heavily on social media for a review, and for me personally, it's one of the pivotal Aussie war movies when I was growing up. As a child of the 1980s, I was in my early teens when the huge wave of American Vietnam War movies and television series hit, and as much as I loved consuming every second of what was available, it wasn't entirely applicable to me as an Aussie. Enter The Odd Angry Shot, which I initially came across in book form as a 12-year-old and really enjoyed. The book, written by William Nagel, a veteran of two tours, spoke to me in the sense that it captured the unique Aussie sense of humour and delivered a different aspect of the war that American literature and media had portrayed to that date. We Aussies have a culture all of our own, particularly in military circles, and Nagel did an incredible job of recreating it in his book. So not long after reading, I then discovered there was a movie version starring Graham Kennedy, someone I'd known of as a comedian and TV variety show presenter. My dad was of Kennedy's generation and a big fan. However, even he was sceptical about whether or not he'd be able to transfer his immense talent to the big screen, especially in a war flick. We got our hands on a VHS copy and we're not disappointed. For me, I was immediately impressed with how true to the book it was. I was quite highly strung at that age, and whilst not exactly a rivet counter in the making, I did like things to be how they should be, and this movie really nailed it as far as I was concerned. Also noticeable for me was Brian Brown being in the cast at around the same time he was on TV in a movie called The Shirley, which is pretty popular where I lived. I also recognised him from Breaker Morant, a great war movie I'd watched with my dad on a number of occasions. William Nagel wrote the scripts for two other Aussie war movies, Death of a Soldier about the brownout strangler Eddie Leonsky, which I just rewatched last week and will review soon, and The Siege of Firebase Gloria, one of the few Aussie movies based solely on the Vietnam conflict. So, what's this movie about? Following his 21st birthday, Bill embarks on a journey to Vietnam, joining the ranks of the Australian Special Air Services, a group of elite professionals who hold a certain disdain for the conscripted troops known as the Nashos. Throughout this venture, Bill forges a deep bond with his best mate, the cheerful and seasoned Harry, who possesses a charming yet cynical outlook on life. Accompanying them are Rogers, Dawson and Scott, and later Bung joins their group, who's convinced that they are all fighting a noble battle for their country. Within the confines of their camp, their daily routine is a medley of rain-soaked days, shared bottles of beer, intense card games, and less than desirable sustenance. However, these mundane moments are punctuated by occasional bursts of both exhilaration and terror when the soldiers embark on jungle patrols. As their tour progresses, they are thrust into realistically portrayed skirmishes with the enemy, resulting in the gradual diminishment of their numbers. The escalating body count leaves Bill increasingly eager for the day he can return home, yet he is plagued by a haunting question: what awaits him on his arrival? As anticipated by the astute Harry, the homecoming is met with an icy reception, a stark contrast to the warmth they had hoped to find, best captured by Harry's quote: "The Commos will win, and no one at home in Australia will thank them for going. The rich don't fight wars, but poor Australians are always lining up to take part." The soldiers of 21 SASR Regiment are based at Nui Dat, a famous location in Aussie military history that gets a mention in the Red Gum anti-war song "I Was Only 19", which, like The Odd Angry Shot, was released at a time when the public was still unwilling to speak about the Vietnam War and possibly unaware of a lot of what actually happened over there. Director Tom Jeffries, speaking of the movie, was quoted in an article on the National Archives of Australia website saying, "It was a risky commercial venture making this movie in 1978. The Vietnam War was a dirty subject. Few people wanted to be reminded of our involvement. Remember, the soldiers' welcome home march didn't happen until about 7 years after the film was made. So that's about 1985-6. But I wasn't making a conventional war movie. What I wanted to convey was soldiers as real people. Although the men are tough professionals, we focus on the human side of their lives. The film shows their courage, their fears, their loves, and their humour, the full range of emotions shared and understood by everyone." In the same article, producer Sue Milliken said, "We made this film in 1978, which was only 4 years after the end of the war for us, so feelings are still very strong. The book said everything you needed to know about the misery and alienation of fighting a war, which should never have been fought in the first place. About the real SASR in Vietnam, situated in Nui Dat, the SASR, Special Air Service Regiment, assumed the crucial role of furnishing vital intelligence to both the 1st Australian Task Force and their counterparts in the US forces. Their operational sphere encompassed a wide expanse spanning Phuoc Toi province, as well as the provinces of Bin Hoa, Long Can, and Bin Toi. Commencing in 1966, SASR squadrons partook in year-long deployments to Vietnam, with each of the 3 Sabre squadrons undertaking 2 distinct tours before the final squadron's withdrawal in 1971. Their diverse array of missions encompassed medium-range reconnaissance patrols, the vigilant observation of enemy troop movements, and audacious long-range offensive operations and ambushes within hostile enemy-controlled territory. In the dense terrain of jungle and bushland, small groups consisting of 4 to 6 individuals operated with calculated precision. They embraced a slower pace compared to conventional infantry, utilising their heavy weaponry and deploying a rapid rate of fire to create the illusion of a formidable, larger force during engagements, while simultaneously providing support for their strategic retreats. The primary mode of transportation for these elite forces was through helicopters, which worked in close collaboration with No. 9 Squadron RAAF. This partnership ensured the swift and accurate insertion and extraction of the patrols into designated landing zones nestled within the treetops of the jungle. In certain instances, the SASR patrols employed a clever ruse when utilising M113 armoured personnel carriers, deliberately misleading the Viet Cong by disguising their insertion and the exact location of their drop-off point, despite the conspicuous noise generated by their movements within the jungle. Additionally, the SASR undertook operational parachute jumps to further expand their range of deployment and surprise their adversaries. Throughout its deployment in Vietnam, the SASR demonstrated exceptional effectiveness, earning the respect of the Viet Cong, who referred to them as Ma Rung, or the Phantoms of the Jungle, due to their unparalleled stealth and elusiveness. Over the course of 6 years, the Australian and New Zealand SAS units conducted an impressive number of patrols, totalling nearly 1,200, and dealt significant blows to the Viet Cong. The enemy suffered heavy losses with 492 confirmed kills, 106 possibly killed, 47 wounded, 10 possibly wounded, and 11 prisoners taken captive. In comparison, the SASR's own casualties were minimal, with 1 soldier killed in action, 1 succumbing to wounds, 3 accidental deaths, 1 missing, and 1 death due to illness. Additionally, 28 men were wounded during the course of their deployment. It is noteworthy that a total of 580 brave individuals served in the SASR in Vietnam during this period. All right, so who made it? It was directed, produced, and written by Tom Jeffrey. Previous movie credits to Removalists and Weekend of Shadows. He'd been head of the Producers and Directors Guild of Australia previously and was also a consultant on the Experimental Film Fund and on the Film, Radio and Television Board of the Australian Council for the Arts. The majority of his work was in television on the ABC network, which is the government-funded network for those not in Australia. Also produced by Sue Milliken, who has since worked on Sirens, pretty controversial movie in its time, and Dating the Enemy. She was awarded with an Order of Australia for her services to the Australian film industry and support of Indigenous filmmakers. Milliken also revealed in another interview that she initially was of the understanding that William Nagel had been a serving SAS soldier. However, it was later discovered that he'd in fact served as a cook. She said he nevertheless had an ear for the vernacular of SAS soldiers. On the topic of military banter in movies, it's something I've discussed with many veterans over the years, and most agree that very few films get it right or even close. And that's not just Aussies, it's Americans and English as well, and even a couple of Germans. I myself have some experience of it firsthand from serving members and feel there's a fine line between banter and just talking shit. Hollywood in particular leans very heavily towards the latter, whereas the Odd Angry Shot absolutely nails it and totally aces the way Aussies speak to each other in general, let alone in the military as well. The music was by Michael Carlos, who also worked on Time Lapse and Storm Boy. Carlos composed the majority of music used in the film. However, he broke with convention to include two songs not composed by himself. Normie Rowe and Nasho himself wrote Who Cares Anyway specifically for this movie, and a cover version of John Denver's Leaving on a Jet Plane by Peter, Paul and Mary was also included, despite being uncredited. Speaking at the time, Carlos explained that he'd never set out to specifically use other people's music. However, they were both strong songs that were reflective of that era of the 60s, especially that Leaving on a Jet Plane is pretty applicable. The budget was 600,000 Australian dollars and it returned 866,000 Australian dollars at the box office, which is probably not too bad, really, for such a low-budget movie. IMDb gave it 6.6 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes 78%, and 81% of Google users have given it a thumbs up, which that speaks pretty good volumes of how good it is. Now, not everyone was as complimentary as most fans of the movie, with a screening in Western Australia canned from being shown at the 150th year Royal Gala celebration attended by Charles, Prince of Wales, now King Charles III. State Premier Charles Court felt that there was too much swearing and nudity to be shown in front of royalty, which prompted the leader of the opposition to declare his rival to be a laughingstock and a prude for refusing to allow a 30-year-old prince to watch a movie with a 15-plus rating. Now, the cast features Graham Kennedy, as already mentioned, as Harry. He's got a massive body of TV work, but his best-known movies are Don's Party and The Club. He also had a cameo role in On the Beach, which is a really good movie I've watched recently. John Hargraves as Bung. He's a prolific actor known for Spy Force and Matlock Police. John Jarrett as Bill. Modern audiences probably know him best for being Mick Taylor in Wolf Creek. I was trying to think of his last name there, but yeah, Mick Taylor. Wolf Creek 1, 2, and 3 in the TV series. I believe he's out now as well. And he was also in The Great McCarthy and a heap of TV roles, McLeod's Daughters, Always Greener, heaps. Brian Brown as Rogers was in Cocktail, Breaker Morant, Two Hands. That one with Sigourney Weaver where she goes into the African forest with the gorillas in the Mist, I think it's called. He's been in heaps of stuff. Like brilliant actor, really love him. He was in The Shirley, as I also mentioned as well. Graham Blundell as Dawson. He was in Alvin Purple and The Year My Voice Broke, as well as the Vietnam TV series from 1986-7. Richard Moyer as Medic. He seems to make a few appearances in Aussie war movies and series. The Light Horseman was one of them. Although he's probably best known for playing Fox in 1982's Running on Empty. Ray Marr as Ranger Corporal, known universally as the iconic Alf Stewart in Home and Away. He was also in The Great Bookie Robbery, Prisoner, plenty of other stuff. Absolute Aussie icon. Everyone loves him in this country. He's known for saying things like Stone on Bloody Crows and I was told he's a Roman sandal, that sort of thing. Frankie J. Holden as Spotted Soldier. He was a singer in All 55, a band from the mid-70s who were like a 50s tribute band. Really good. My dad's got a few of their albums, so I used to play them when I was a kid. He played a fictional detective in the original Underbelly series, did a really good job in that. And probably the other well-known guy I can think of is Brian Wenzel as Bill's dad. He was Sergeant Frank Gilroy in A Country Practice back in the 80s and 90s. Some interesting facts about the movie. It had a lot of physical and technical support from the Australian Army and Air Force, as well as government assistance. Hueys used during patrol scenes were on loan from the RAAF and had actually been in previous use during the Vietnam War. Filming also took place at the Canungra Training Centre in Queensland, despite some nerves amongst the top brass who were somewhat reluctant to get involved in anything related to the conflict in Vietnam. Notably, the Australian Army had previously knocked back an offer to film Apocalypse Now at the same location. Probably regret that now, but shit happens. The scenes of Vung Tau were shot at the Sydney Showgrounds, and the temple scene was staged at Canungra's Vietnam era jungle training centre. These two locations were chosen due to nowhere in Australia generally resembling the Vietnamese sites in real life. Sue Milliken said of the Army's participation, "We shot for 6 weeks at the Canungra Land Warfare Centre, and the soldiers couldn't have been more helpful." After filming wrapped, the production staff were presented with a plaque of thanks by their Army minders, which is a pretty good gesture. And Graham Kennedy spoke about training at Canungra, saying, "Having to run, fall, and crawl in the mud with a rifle and heavy pack on my back, it's not what I'm used to, being a lazy person with a fondness for creature comforts. Having also lived the nighttime television life for 22 years. Now, what they got right. So, drawing from my knowledge of Vietnam era Australian military, as well as researching in a couple of books written by the father of one of my former girlfriends, who was a veteran, it's my opinion that pretty much everything was spot on, from the uniforms to the equipment. Obviously, there's an element of fiction to the storytelling and higher casualty rates than what occurred in real life, although it is a movie, so that is neither right or wrong. Again, it's a fictional movie that doesn't claim to be a true story. Contrasting that, though, is the strong attention paid to getting the overall feel right, from the characterisation to the quality of banter and the unique Aussie humour. Now, I recently rewatched this with my 14-year-old son after he'd read the book, so history repeating itself. And he agreed with my sentiments from 35 years ago regarding how true to the original story Tom Jeffrey kept it. He also related to me that the conversations and jokes were along the lines of those he'd overheard me having with veteran mates of mine. To me, that's a strong point of this movie and its ability to replicate a kind of real-life atmosphere that even casual observers and non-military people can still relate to, while still recognising that this is what Aussie soldiers are actually like. Something noticeable is modifications made to the M60 machine gun, where the barrel is shortened and an SLR pistol grip replaces the front handgun. This was absolutely done by SASR operatives during Vietnam. It is a nice nod to how much emphasis was placed on attention to detail. A lot of the stored weapons also had custom camouflage paint and dressing packs taped to them, which actually happened. I noticed among the Viet Cong soldiers' weaponry was some M1 carbines, and another Aussie movie about Vietnam that shows Viet Cong soldiers using vintage guns from Western armies is Danger Close, The Battle of Long Tan. Now, this to me is a very indicative factor of reality, as they didn't all tote AK-47s and quite often utilised captured weapons from their former enemies, the French. And let's face it, as long as a gun shoots bullets of a big enough calibre to wound or kill an enemy, very few soldiers are going to care what country it was manufactured in. Right, what I liked about it, throughout this episode, I've related my thoughts on just how well made this movie is, and it absolutely is. I mean, on a $600,000 budget, even for 1978, they've packed so much into it that it's reflective of the real deal without having to bombard viewers with outlandish subplots, romantic tropes that don't necessarily fit in with the rest of the narrative, or a higher body count than day one of the song. It's just a casual, laid-back, incredibly accurate portrayal of Aussie larrikins with the occasional glimpses of war's harsh brutality, and is loaded with great acting talent. Kennedy, Jarrett, and Brown just get their roles 100% and make you believe in everything they say and do. Aussie movies of that era generally don't hit that same acting sweet spot, so it really stands out even more so when you watch Odd Angry Shot side by side with other contemporaries of that era. I mean, look, I mentioned it elsewhere previously, the Ozploitation era of the 70s, early to mid 80s of Aussie movies. The acting was shit. The story writing was lazy. The budgets were tiny, and really they were just making movies for the sake of making them. A lot of them didn't make sense. They were shit. This one is none of those things. It is fucking awesome. And even some of the quotes, despite being scripted, are exactly how you'd expect Australian people to speak, not to mention becoming part of the national vocabulary for years to come. If you've ever spent a considerable amount of time in Northern Australia and haven't said, you can set your watch to this fucking rain, you've clearly lived your life as a mushroom. Now, when the film was made, Vietnam War movies and even stories were not something the mainstream media wanted to put out there for us all to consume. It was still raw. The public response to the war was not great at all. So this really stepped into uncharted territory and explored the war from the perspective of those who served, as well as importantly giving a large focus to the anxiety around what and who they were fighting for, providing some great perspective as well into how a lack of support at home affected the troops on deployment and when their tours ended. The Odd Angry Shot is not the best movie you'll ever see, nor is it the worst. In fact, it's a hell of a lot closer to the best than it is to the worst. Let's face it, if you've seen it, you'll agree with me. I've yet to speak directly with anyone who thought it was a shit movie. Everyone just seems to get it and appreciate the message it's putting across. In my opinion, very few war movies have this particular quality, regardless of where they're made or what era they were made in or what war they were about. I've got it in my top 10 of all time, possibly even my top 5, and have it on rotation when I need a little dose of reality to get me through. I'll just look around, as the DVD sitting on my TV cabinet at the moment next to my DVD player. So if you haven't watched it, get your hands on a copy and put your feet up, as I seriously can't see you being disappointed. Even if you're a river counter, you'll get it. You'll love it. So thanks for listening to another episode of Zero Hour. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to hear more, look for us on social media under the name Still Hat Productions or 0 Hour Reviews on Spotify. And don't forget to like, subscribe, switch on notifications, and leave a 5-star review so we can keep the content flowing at the front of your feed. Until next time, though, I'll see you when I see you.